My name's Trevor Butterworth. I'm co-founder and VP at Indicio, responsible for communication and governance. And well, at least tonight I'm communicating. So this topic is a really interesting one for me personally, having been involved prior to Indicio in Series 2030, which was the flagship project of the Sustainable Development Goal to end world hunger. All of which was focused on how can we improve data for farmers in order that they can be more sustainable, encourage growth, and of course, feed the planet. There are, according to the World Bank, 570 million farms in the world. In 2014, each farm produced 190,000 data points per day. By 2050, that estimate will go up to 4.1 million. So the value chain, what we call the value chain in agriculture over the past decade, has exploded as data has come in from all angles in order to transform agriculture. And some of these issues are obviously economic, others are around sustainability. Farms account for 29% of all global greenhouse gases. So when we think about verifiable credentials, we don't often think of farmers, which is why this project is very exciting. And to tell us about how decentralized identity and verifiable credentials and verifiable data are going to transform the agribusiness and agriculture and farming, we have Klaeri and Sharons. So I'm going to hand it over to you. Just if you can give us a little bit of background about who you are and what you do, and then launch into this exciting topic.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Trevor. So my name is Klaeri Schelhowe. I'm the managing director of Shadowrock, which is the company which is contracted to the Trust Alliance to progress this digital journey. We are really pleased and happy to share all our learnings and experience with all of you guys. And thanks a lot for the invitation from Indicio to this meetup. My background is supply chain, track and trace and traceability. And of course, you come to the point that you need to interpret data and proofs and making digital claims verifiable. So that's where my passion and my background is. And I'm really keen to progress the digital journey for the primary industry. And we will guide you through our journey today and have hopefully a good discussion and questions and share the learnings and the experience. So thank you very much. And I can hand over to Sharon.
Hi, thanks, Klaeri. Good morning, good afternoon, or maybe good evening. Yeah, I'm Sharon Mabbott, and my background is IT, but last century IT, and I'm also a supply chain consultant. But my main focus is benefits realization for projects. So on this, for the Trust Alliance, I look after the project management, and in particular on the Digital Farm Wallet project, which we're going to hear all about, which we're really passionate about, but also from the point of benefits realization. There has to be a value proposition for all of the stakeholders. So thank you.
Great. Okay, Klaeri, do you want to kick off?
Yes, I will share my screen. I hope that you can see that. So today's presentation should be really to give you a little bit background about the Trust Alliance and our pioneering work for the digital wallets and the verifiable credentials in the food supply chain / on the farmer side here in New Zealand. As you hear, I would say normally morena to you when we use the Maori language, or I would say good morning and servus to you when I use my home language, which is German. So what we are covering today is really the problem statement, where all this journey started, and explain to you a little bit more about what kind of problems we see on farms and across the whole value chain. Then give you an outline about the ecosystem approach, because the Trust Alliance is an incorporated society, a consortium of different organizations who are having the coalition of willingness to solve these problems, these common problems. Then a little bit background about our journey, and then I will hand over to Sharon, who will give you a deeper dive in the Digital Farm Wallet pilot project, and then we can have a discussion and all your questions and comments and views on our presented work. So coming to the problem statement on farm, and this graphic really shows it already. It's a lot of data mess, and we heard it from Trevor. 4.1 million data points per farm next in 2050 or year. And you see the green bubble here. And these data points are either digital or still in handwritten on clipboards or with icons. So there's a lot of activity on farm of data management. And to give you an overview of why we need data points, we have crop information on some farms, we have geospatial information on farms, we have animal welfare claims or proof points required, environmental data, and these are only examples because you can think about health and safety, modern slavery, all ESG components are managed and handled on farm as well. The Trust Alliance decided we will start on the farm from the supply chain perspective because that is the origin, the source of origin, where the first data points are created and have to be handed over and travel through the whole supply chain. So on the left side, data points. On the right side, you see the purposes in clusters or categories why data needs to be shared from farm on farm organizations. And when we talk about farmer, it's not only Farmer Joe, it is really big farm organizations as well, which we are focusing on. They have to share data points and provide digital proofs for financial access to the banks. Otherwise, they won't get a green loan or sustainable linked loan. They have to provide compliance data to the government. We call it here in New Zealand the beehive because our government is called the beehive due to the architectural design of the building there. So that's easy. Beehive for compliance work and a license to operate, environmental agreements, everything there needs to be provided to the beehive or regional councils as well. Then we have, of course, the big bees is the buyers that are all the food processors, the retailers, and as well us as a consumer for international market access, for trade agreements, for example, for a deforestation proof, everything what needs to be provided when the goods are leaving the country. Food safety ones. So you see the farmer has a lot of challenges to manage his data. And the interesting part is that we have found out that data points, same data points have to be shared to several stakeholders on the right side. And so I mentioned to you that we are working with a consortium, so an alliance group, which is in a corporate society, who are companies who are really coming together and want to tackle the problem together. Just here some companies which are our members, where we are working with. What is the overall goal of the Trust Alliance? We want to help the industry, so the primary sector, which is our food and fiber sector, helping them to come from a brand promise, like New Zealand is green and clean, to a brand proof. How can we prove that? And how can we differentiate that from other countries or other providers that we are really green and clean and taking care of animal welfare, about our environment, and to drive consumer decisions with it. So having a kind of a premium approach as well, and provide really evidence of that. And the opposite is, of course, as you maybe all are aware of, greenwashing, which we try to avoid and really provide evidence of some data points here. To give you an outlook of what the Trust Alliance has as a goal is we are providing a data sharing framework with tools and protocols and standards and data governance. We are not a data storage and a commercial solution or a data aggregation solution. So the Trust Alliance itself, we don't hold any data. And with our digital farm wallet pilot project, we sometimes get mixed up with, you are another app provider. No, we are not. So that's in the experience was showing to mention what we are not is helping as well the industry to not getting confused where the Trust Alliance in the ecosystem fits in. So we are really enabling and securing the permissioned data sharing in the decentralized identity world with verifiable credentials. That is our space where we are working in. We all know that there are other ways of data sharing as well, but the Trust Alliance is really focusing on decentralized data sharing. The goal for the farmer, and I'm coming back to the farmer now, is really to make sure that the farmer has an easier life and a more secure life of his data, and have evidence of his good management practice. So the first goal is to capture data once and not several times in several platforms and have to enter data several times for different purposes. We want to enable him. Yeah,
Klaeri,
sorry.
just if I might interrupt a little bit.
Yes.
How big an issue is the multiplicity? You know, we might think, well, how big a problem is it to submit data once or twice? Is it more complicated than that?
So a very good point. I come to that in a second when we come to our use case in the vegetable industry, but we found out with our journey and really the discovery phases and our use cases discovery that a farmer has to, for example, give 7 times geospatial information to the industry before he's allowed to grow any single vegetable. And it's the same piece of data, which he has to give 7 times. And you can multiply that with a lot of other data sets, like greenhouse gas. The banks want greenhouse gas, the buyers want greenhouse gas, and the beehive, so our government wants greenhouse gas as well. And there are only few examples that you have to give the same data set to several parties over and over and over again. So it's an absolutely burden for the farmer. And when you have contact with farmers, they love to farm. They don't want, otherwise there would be a data scientist or a data analyst. They love to farm and they want to farm and do that in the best way they can. They don't want to manage their data. They hate it. And then efficiency is important for them, and effectiveness as well, and productivity. They don't have time. They're working anyway 7 days a week.
Yeah, it's a great
point. That's, it's really a huge problem across the whole sector. Does it answer your question?
Yes. Yeah. No. I think that's fascinating detail.
Okay. Yeah. And then we want to help him that he can share it when the data point is required in a permissioned way. Because what happens now is that the software company A is sharing the data on behalf of the farmer with another company. And the farmer have no control about his data, has no visibility where his data point is traveling to. And the permissioning is managed maybe legally by terms and conditions, but there is not really an evidence for the farmer. Is there a question?
Yes, there's a question from Alex. So data intake is a core bottleneck.
Data interoperability is the bottleneck, I would say. The entry is in one system, but you need data points in either at other third parties or at other systems as well. So you have a tool for geospatial and location management, and you have another tool for environmental and fertilizer management, for example. How is the data traveling now from one tool to the other? That's internally on the farm. That's what we call the data interoperability challenge, which was the first problem we started to tackle. But how is this data point then traveling out of the farm gate? That is the bigger problem. And how is that immutable and tamper resistant? Because as you maybe can understand, everybody wants to have a low greenhouse gas emission. So how can we make sure that when it is 8, that 8 greenhouse gas emissions, CO2 emissions, for example, is traveling through the whole supply chain as a verifiable credential with the number 8, and nobody is tampering with it and can be then aggregated and for other reports. But the immutability and the tamper resistance is very important here because it's sensitive data as well, and everybody wants to have a low emission. And the farmer is very, very sensitive about his data to share anyway. So he wants to protect this as much as he can, because he is facing sometimes activities against farming, or data points are taken out of different contexts and will be used against him in another policy. So they are really, really cautious. And when we think about data privacy, the farmer is normally living on his farm. So private data and the location where his farm is his living area as well. So that something needs more protection than potentially in other businesses.
So Klaeri, we've had a very interesting question in the chat. I'm going to ask, do you want to answer it at the end, or would you prefer to go through, or do you want to tackle the question now?
It depends on the content, but I'm happy to tackle the question now.
Okay, so the question from Robinson Lopez is, how can you interact with legacy systems? Data can be imported from farm management systems or data collection apps? Question.
Yes, they can import it and be exported between different systems. That's correct. But how do you make it immutable? And how do you make sure that there is not tampered with? So I think it comes down to the use case. What kind of data you want to import and export to other systems? Is this data point, or does this data point require trust, immutability, and does it need to be portable and travel outside the farm gate as well?
Okay.
Otherwise, you can import, export, and then we go into data standards and schemas. And I don't think that we should go in there. Sharon, do you have anything to add here?
Yeah, I think something that I was going to mention when I got to my section, sorry for jumping in, but the key point here for us, and that was a really good question, is that this is not a replacement for APIs. It's very specific, fit for purpose. And that's why we say sharing of key, critical, and or strategic data points. So it's not for your IoT data coming on from your milk vat every 2 seconds or whatever. It's from your strategic, key, critical, and it's really around digital proofs, those data points that need to be proven from a digital perspective. And you'll see when we get into the what we've done for the pilot, we can answer that question more fully. But we're not trying to take masses of data and move it around from system to system.
Yeah. Should we give you an outlook of the work we have done as an exemplar for the supply chain analysis in the vegetable sector? So that was really proven our problem statement, because when you have look into every single step of the supply chain, which data points are critical and important to be shared, and how often are they used and by whom. So we made a big analysis of this, and that was, for example, where we found out that actually 7 times the land boundary of a farm or a paddock has to be provided to the different stakeholders and auditors here. So in the supply chain, you see we have the seed production then we have the commercial growing, we have the food processing, the export part, the levy collection, and then it goes up to the retailer and the food services up until it's really farm to fork or farm to plate, however you would like to see that. That was the starting point of the trust alliance, that we're coming from a provenance point of view. But with these, we have identified with our members 34 different use cases.
Wow.
Where it is super crucial and critical of specific data points which need to be verified, protected, and revocable as well. And these 34 use cases we have clustered into 10 different categories, because we thought we have to start somewhere. What is the biggest priority? Where do we start? And these are just categories where verifiable credentials can make a huge difference. So in the biosecurity area, because biosecurity, when we have contamination of food, when we have, especially in New Zealand, when we anyway very cautious about what kind of food is coming in, you have data points, you need to check licenses, you need to check certifications. So that could be all handled with verifiable credentials. Food safety, when we talk about food processing, cool chain, that there's an audit, for example, that the cool chain wasn't interrupted, and then the machine report can be automatically be created into or be transformed in a verifiable credential, which can be handed over to the auditors. So the auditors not necessarily need to come every week to the food processing manufacturing site and check if they are running the cool chain properly, or the X-ray machine or the metal detector. Then we have compliance and consensus, the license to operate that you get from the government or from auditors can be handled as well with verifiable credentials. In the trade finance, it's a huge area to work with immutable records that you can prove already that the transaction took place, so that the bank can release earlier the money of an export shipment. So that really should give you an idea of where in the supply chain where we can act with digital proofs, or where digital proofs are required. Based on that, we here in the Trust Alliance, and you know it as well, decentralized identifier or verifiable credentials is not digital identity, is not only for a human being. It is really for an organization, for a certificate, for an animal, if we want to, for a fence, for a tractor, for an IoT device. So everything what is happening or being identified in the supply chain can have a digital identity. And based on that, we said, okay, we have to start in three main categories. That the first one is we have to look into identity. How do we identify an organization, a human being, a thing, a license, a certification, or an animal? Second part is a location, because location is very important to understand where are my animals, where is my waterway, where is my fence, and where is my produce in the shelf of the retailer or in the supply chain. And the last box is areas where you can look into is the critical control points and action points across the supply chain. So that was basically that is our rigid construction house. So identity, location, and critical control points. And then into these categories, we are building out and unpack the different use cases and applications with our members who wants to progress and improve the situation of providing digital proofs and claims. And with all of these analysis work and research discovery work, we were coming to the conclusion that the digital farm wallet could be the key data manager for the farmer and on the farm to manage critical and crucial data. And we say that especially is very specific. It is not either or, it is complementary to all old legacy systems and other ways of data sharing. But when you require trust, when you require immutability and verification and portability, then we are convinced that the verifiable credential approach is the right one to move forward. So we positioned our digital farm wallet as the data manager for farmers and farm organizations, and that was ending into our digital farm wallet pilot project, which we were progressing, which was co-funded by our members and co-funded from the government, which Sharon is leading. And we can take you now on the digital journey of how farmers can benefit from the digital wallet. Any questions so far to my part before we dive into the digital farm wallet approach? Okay, thank you. Then over to you, Sharon.
Yeah, thanks very much. Yeah, so we started at the beginning of 2023, seems like ages ago, with the Digital Farm Wallet pilot project. It's co-funded with the MPI. So we got MPI's Ministry for Primary Industries, so our agricultural government section, along with our members from the Trust Alliance. So there's a high degree of governance and visibility and profiling around this, as you can imagine. And we've done a previous project, also co-funded with the MPI, around digital farm environment plans. And that gave us a lot of insight. So all the stuff that we can say about what a farm is feeling, because we've done all of the stakeholder analysis. So it wasn't just something like, oh, we think this is a good idea. There was a lot of background to that. So we're very excited about our digital farm wallet. If you don't mind going to the next one. Okay, so I'm going to take you through a little bit about how we showed and spoke about this to the farmer, because we can talk about the technology. Obviously, we have wonderful vendors that provided the technology stack. But the key part here was to understand how will our stakeholders adopt this concept, not so much the technology, but the concept that we can then bring the technology stack to deliver. So if you can imagine our farmers, we had kind of a broad spectrum. We were actually really, really lucky because we had a farmer focus group. So we went into farmer focus groups once we had set up the prototype, the digital farm wallet with verifiable credentials. But one of the key things here was to understand that the farmers could be at different levels of maturity. And we'd got a lot of that coming through the research we'd done in the previous project. So I wanted the farmers to be really comfortable with this digital world and all of the new jargon. We all know IT people love jargon, and we live in that world. So one of the examples that we used here was that everyone's got a physical wallet. And in your physical wallet, you've got your driver's license. And I'm sure you guys have used this as well. And your driver's license is a physical credential. It's issued by a credible source. It says something about you. It says something about who you are, your identity, and what you can do with that, i.e. drive a car. It also says that you can use that to go and prove your age if you needed to at a liquor store, for example. And so just in the same way, we now talk about a digital wallet, which has digital credentials, which is also issued by a credible source and can be used for various purposes. Tells you about your ID, tells you about what you can do, what you're accredited to do. But it's got a whole lot more capability and capacity. So the big things that we're talking about here is the privacy thing. So when you pull out your driver's license, your physical driver's license, for any other purpose, everyone can see what's on your driver's license. Possibly what kind of car you can drive, even though you just have to prove that you're of age. Whereas with the digital one, you've got that selective sharing of details. You can keep things private, and you've got proof of holder. So I don't know if this is politically correct or not, but a couple of years ago, we had a COVID passport in New Zealand, and once you'd got your vaccinations, you could use that COVID passport. And that was our very first example of a verifiable credential. We didn't call it that in those days, but it was something that I could say you've already touched a verifiable credential or digital proof if you've ever had your COVID passport. So this was just a way of, because people get, IT, digital, we don't understand it, we can't use it. And what we want is to make this very practical for the farmers, obviously from an adoption point of view. So then just to go back now zoomed in hugely on the wallet, but now go back to the pilot that we're doing. What we've got is we had marvelous, obviously our members, and we had a call to action, and we had a number of our members say, yes, we want to be involved from the issuing side, from the issuing point of view. And just to run through that, because you won't be familiar with them, MyEnviro is a farm environment planning vendor. They do amazing stuff in a particular region in New Zealand around farm environment plans, but they were able to give us the greenhouse gas emissions number. So that was really important. So we chose a particular use case to showcase what a digital farm wallet with verifiable credentials could mean. It was a good thing and a bad thing in that people then got stuck on this is the only thing it can do. So we had to keep saying, this is a prototype. This is just to show you the art of the possible and give you an idea, because then you can kind of extrapolate that into anything. But anyway, our use case was getting the greenhouse gas number from your MyEnviro. Now, MyEnviro is a system that the farmer will have. Farmers have multiple systems on farm. You saw that initially, multiple systems on farm. Those are the legacy systems that we were talking about. And you go into one farm system for this number, and you go into your other farm system to do something else, your animal welfare. Then you've got your accounting. It's all different systems on farm. And that's where that whole thing about data interoperability of the on-farm comes into play. And we have to be very careful about, yeah, we can use something like that for this, but really what we're focusing on are digital proofs. And we've kind of learned that over the last year and a bit, is that this is a specific use case for digital proofs. So anyway, I digress. To go back, so we had MyBalance is one of our large agri-fertilizer companies, and they were giving us what we call the NCAP score, which is our nitrogen emissions score. And also they're very big in geospatial. So we got farm boundary from that. Now that was really exciting because we were able to get geospatial verifiable credentials into the farm wallet. Then we have a neutral body called Federated Farmers, which kind of, we use them to maintain that neutrality. It's Federated Farmers members. It's also a membership organization. And we said that that was where we would get our farm ID, which became a really important verifiable credential, our first verifiable credential around identity, to say this farmer is this person, and we acknowledge them, because when we go into the digital farm wallet and the verifiable credentials, we need that common identifier to say, if you Farmer Joe in this system, you might be Farmer John in that system, but you're actually the same farmer. So that we understand that when we're issuing a greenhouse gas for Farmer Joe and we want his nitrogen emissions or her nitrogen emissions, it's actually Farmer Joanna, same person. So Farm ID was a very important verifiable credential. And from that process, we actually started this verifiable credential engineering process. And it's really around, and I don't want to get too technical, around the canonical model, and Indicia helped us a lot with it, around the data schema for the verifiable credential becomes extremely important, because that allows us to have the right level of aggregation or disaggregation so that we can reuse parts of that verifiable credential. Just to go back to what Klaeri was alluding to earlier, it's the same data point on farm. When we say it's the same data point that needs to be shared with different stakeholders, what actually happens is it's the same data point, but it's in different formats. So the farmer is continuously having to work with the same piece of data, but put it into different formats because the relying parties, or the people on the right-hand side, want it in different formats. Now this takes away that. So it's not just a case of, oh, I've got that data point there, let me just send it on to these 5 people. The poor farmer in the middle has to go to whatever system that piece of data is sitting in, and it's sitting in 5 different systems in different formats. And that's the problem there. So having the verifiable credential in the middle creates that kind of canonical data model or schema, which allows the farmer to say, I've got a greenhouse gas, and whether it's the bank that wants it, or whether it's Silver Fern Farms, one of our producers that want it, I can send it to them and they'll know what format to expect it in. And please jump in if this is not making any sense. Quite happy to make this kind of more workshopy. So anyway, we had a whole lot of issuers on the left-hand side for our use case, for our pilot participants. And then we had, we created our digital farm wallet. You can't see it because I've got my background on, but we created the an actual digital wallet, which was, we branded as Federated Farmers because of the neutral context. And the farmer was actually able to download that Federated Farm. Thank you, Carl. This digital wallet. I don't know if we want to go too much clearer into the technology. Anyway, you guys.
No. I think it's more around the use case of the application, understand where the technology, because I think the background is quite technology loaded here from the audience. So really maybe go.
I don't worry about that. So then we created the actual ability, thank you, for the farmer. Then we didn't have it in the first phase, we didn't have a lot of actual relying parties. So we used it as examples. So once we've got the greenhouse gas from MyEnviro, once we've got the nitrogen emissions and the boundaries from Balance in your farm wallet as a verifiable credential, we will show you how you can use this data, same data, to share with our regional council for consent, or share with ANZ, which is our bank, for a better green loan, or share with your producer to prove that you've actually met the greenhouse gas number, or what we call the NCAP number. The key here, just before we go on, is this thing at the bottom here, the Trust Alliance, the governance framework, because we need to have this in a governed way. Sorry, Alex, I'll look at that now. Is there no? No, there isn't. Very good point. There is not. And Klaeri can talk more about that later. The governance framework then makes this operational in a perspective of everyone can trust it, and it's a membership. It's an alliance, and we have the same kind of standards. we have the same way of doing things, because as you guys will know, there's a lot of different ways of handling this. So the fact that we could do this within the governance framework also made it really, really a strong value proposition. Okay, so just a little snippet of what actually happened. We created what we call the demo farm dashboard, and we actually did this demo. Sometimes we had like 40 people online doing this, which was a bit hectic, where we could log in, simulate the farmer logging into their on-farm solution. In this case, it's the MyEnviro solution. So they would log in. On the left-hand side is the actual portal that they log into for MyEnviro. And then there's a big green button there, which is a new button, which is issue GHG credential from the on-farm solution. The farmer then can hit that and then see it actually appear in their digital farm wallet as a verifiable credential. That was really, really powerful. So we actually got the farmers to do that for themselves. They've downloaded the digital wallet. They've gone in via our Supra portal demo dashboard. They've logged into the MyEnviro system or a proxy of it, and they've created something that's literally sitting on their phone. So they can see it on their phone. Then we did the same thing. I think the next slide is for the balance. So log into my balance. We also did something really cool is we used the farm ID, which we haven't showed here. We used the farm ID as a kind of federated login. So once they got their farm ID verifiable credential, they didn't have to use their specific credentials to log into balance or to MyEnviro, which everyone was kind of a byproduct of what we're doing, but a lot of them were like, wow, this is amazing. Anyway, so in their MyBalance nitrogen emissions, they had the ability now to get 2 verifiable credentials. They could click, and when I say they, the farmers running the demo, they could click on get boundary ID and get NCAP ID, and they would get those 2 verifiable credentials in their wallet, which is the next slide. And this was really cool because we managed to get a heat map into their wallet. And I mean, it sounds quite inane, but really that the ability for them to go in and have a look on their phone and see their heat map was like really powerful. So that now they had a series of verifiable credentials that they had been issued. The farmer was holding it literally in their digital farm wallet. So then we gave them examples. And again, we had to say, this is an example, this is a prototype, this is to start the thinking and the awareness. So we had those credentials. We had our farm ID, our GHG, a boundary ID, an NCAP. And then we actually showed them how we could send it out to a third party, or it could be a certifying auditor, to aggregate those 4 verifiable credentials, but not to aggregate them, just all of them, aggregate selective portions of them. And we take them through the demo. So we only take one portion from NCAP, it's just the NCAP number, etc. And we create what we call the Scope 3 emissions report, which then got sent back to the farm wallet. So the farm is now holding another verifiable credential, this verified farm emissions credential. So now we're adding even more value. And then we showed them in the demo, they could then submit that to council, or they could submit that to the bank. And that's really where the value proposition comes in, is what can they do with this information? Because it's great for the farmer to hold this information. It's great for the vendors to be able to issue them as verifiable credentials. But if there's no relying party, if there's no if there's no need for somebody who wants to use that as a digital proof, then the value proposition breaks down. And that's why in our next phase, which we are in now, we're working with actual relying parties to understand their need for those digital proofs. So we're working with one of our meat producers, Silver Fern Farms, and we are taking actual data now from a much smaller cohort of farmers, their GHG, their greenhouse gas number, and then we're aggregating it. So they're getting it from farm directly, actual GHG from their farmer cohort, and then we're aggregating it, and they can then submit that. Silver Fern Farms can use that for their Scope 3 emissions. It means for anyone who's across the GHG thing, it's a PCAF score of 1, which means that data comes direct from farm. It's got a much higher rating than an industry-specific GHG for that area or whatever. So it actually has value for Silver Fern Farms to be able to say, I've got GHG numbers as a verifiable credential direct from farmer. So when Silver Fern Farms goes to their bank, they can get a better greenhouse loan percentage or whatever. And Klaeri, I think, is that?
How do sorry, can I interrupt? How as you were undertaking this pilot and taking the farmers through the process and the value proposition, what were their reactions?
So we were really lucky because a lot of people signed up to go for the farmer focus groups. We didn't have to force a lot of people. So we are aware that we were dealing with early adopters and they're excited, but there was a great acceptance. One of their big things was, is the government going to accept this? Which is great. Is the relying party going to accept? Because we can push it and then the council goes, oh no, I just want a PDF. Means nothing. So that was one of their big concerns, which we took up with them. But they got it. They absolutely got that they could have this permissioned way of sharing data securely. And one of the big, because we got feedback, we obviously followed up with our farmers and we had some quite heavy hitting farmers on there. And the one lady who's now actually going to be the new chair of Silver Fern Farms, she said farmers are by nature very suspicious, especially when it comes to giving government data. They don't know what they're doing with it. They don't know what the government's going to do with it. If you think about it, you can get fined for a nitrogen emissions that's too high. So it really is money. So the fact of the matter is that them being in control rather than having a consent, because I'm not knocking it, but what a lot of the big vendors are trying to do is they say to the farmer, give us consent to share your data with another party. And then don't worry, we'll do all of that for you. Just give us your consent. And they think that's permissioning. We're turning that on its head and saying, no. Have you spoken to the farmer about this? Because we have. The permissioning is for the farmer to say, yes, I know what you're going to do. Tell me what you're going to do with it. Oh, you want that so that I can get a consent. Oh, that's great. I'm happy to share it. And then obviously with the whole thing about being able to revoke that, and I say to these people, what about revocation? I go, oh, yes, no. Then they just say, no, stop sharing. But they've got absolutely no visibility and no oversight as to actually what's happening with their data. Once they go to a big vendor and say, yes, you can share my data. They don't know where the data is going. They don't know what it's being used for. They don't know how often it's been used. Whereas when they are in control in terms of the verifiable credential sharing, they know what's happening with their data. Sorry, I ranted and raved about that.
This is the kind of granular detail that's just fascinating to see how this technology is being used, adopted, and understood in the field. I mean, it's the thing I think we in the industry really want to hear, because it also helps us to explain the value proposition to people who haven't encountered the technology.
So when I look back at it, I think we actually did such a good job with the farmers. They got it. It's actually now our focus is now the relying parties. They need to get it. They've got a little bit invested in it because they've got these big legacy systems. But once we unpack and we've gone into a technical education system with our partners now, and we're bringing in the IT people to say, it doesn't impact your 5-year IT roadmap. It's, when you're looking at agents and we're looking at things like that, it's almost like outside of it. It doesn't have to impact. It depends on how much you want to integrate and how you want to integrate and what your use case is. But it's not something to be afraid that you have to throw away everything, because that's what everyone's petrified from a relying party point of view, and to some extent from the issuers. So the kind of transformation, and we're trying to transform an ecosystem, which is pretty difficult, but it's more around the relying parties we're finding. Alex?
So we with an eye on that, we have 11 minutes left. There's a question from Alex in the chat. How does this integrate with current farm ERP systems if it's not a replacement or an API integration layer? Can you also talk about the issuance side of these VCs?
Barry, do you want to take that? Do you have that actual, because maybe we do need to go into the technology side of it.
Yes. Yeah, I think we can answer that in terms of when we have bulk exchange of data between two organizations. Then, Alex, I think you're referring to the API to API approach. But when we're facing, as soon as you want to do that through an ecosystem, then it will, and it's simplified, but then it will look like this. And we all know how hard it is to have the API to API. So that's why we say when you don't need the full bulk exchange of data, handle it through the wallet world. And we especially outline here in the wallet world, it's not only one wallet, because there will be several wallets, as long as we all be somehow sticking to the standards and the interoperability, then it will look like this. So, but that is use case driven, as Sharon mentioned as well. When you need a lot of data exchange, like temperature of milk from every day or every hour, that you don't want to shoot that through the wallet, then you need this kind of landscape. But if you have identified a use case where it's a digital proof for crucial data sets, then you maybe want to consider to go through this way of data sharing and permissioning. So it comes again down to verifiable, immutable, portable. That's basically our filters to say, okay, in which way do we share this data, or how do we share this data? Does it answer your question, Alex? Or
feel free to speak up as well.
Yeah.
I don't need to be the medium. Yeah, there's a thumbs up there.
Okay.
So I think you did a good job. You answered the question, Klaeri.
And yeah, and that's why we really say an outline. It is not either or, it is complementary, and it is really driven by the use case and the requirements of the data sharing mechanism.
So before we open it up to the floor, and just again, mindful of time, are there any summation points that either you, Sharon, or Klaeri want to make via the presentation?
I mean, one point to outline is maybe we really simplified with issuer, holder, and relying party. And in every single step of the supply chain, the issuer or the relying party becomes an issuer as well. So it's easily getting very complex, and it could look like, where is it? Look like this. So you have the issuer on the left side becoming, or the relying party on the left side becoming an issuer, and then it travels through the whole supply chain when you talk about an audit and certification process, for example, as well. So there are much more complex use cases, but I think the starting point is really simplifying it with a digital farm wallet on the farm. And we outlined as well that we talk about an individual wallet and an enterprise wallet. So that is the next step. We piloted now with an individual one, but the enterprise or organizational wallet is the next step to look into. Let's maybe to close here. Yeah, we outlined the benefits for the farmers and for the whole ecosystem again, and then you can, that's basically
so New Zealand is really on the cutting edge of this digitalization of data proofs. Where do you, I mean, 570 million farms, this is you know, you have your own internal scale to bring in more verifiers and more and then more complex use cases. Are you going to be taking that, you know, what's the next step after that? How are you going to take this to the world?
That's a very good question. So spread the word and refer to this pilot project. It's really a fantastic demonstration and showcase, and it's really active, live, and working. So everybody, and I see already some friends on the call in South America where we were speaking to, and as well, as soon as a data point has to travel outside of New Zealand, for example, European deforestation law, European Supply Chain Act, we will have to interact with other regions and other outside of New Zealand. It can't be only staying in New Zealand.
Yep.
And there are a lot of other consortiums already, not necessarily data sharing consortiums, but initiatives who are working on similar things, where we're happy to share our experience and help them to ramp that up, because the hard lift is hopefully done. We are on the journey now for 4 years. Now we are going really into deployment and rolling out and productionization.
Excellent.
And if the Trust Alliance is the right vehicle for that, we will see. But yeah, there's a question from Jim, I think. Sorry.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the presentation. It's fantastic. In the wallet world, is that a business model or is that like a government service? And in other words, I imagine sort of storing and tracking, somebody's got to pay for all the bandwidth and storage that goes into that. You know, is that a business unto itself, or is that a governance service that has to be provided by government of New Zealand?
So the government rolling out a wallet, I don't think that it will be going down well because of the trusted situation and the compliance requirements there. We have, for our own objectives, we said the farmer has not to pay for it. So the ecosystem have to find ways how we can compensate for the costing, and how the commercialization model or the transactional costs will be then managed is in discussion right now. But for us, it is absolutely 100% clear the farmer should not pay for the wallet. The relying parties, and there might be an audience or a group who should pay because they have the advantage of efficiency and productivity there. The issuers as well, because the issuers can enlarge their service providing to the farmers. So it's not maybe not a direct cost, but maybe indirect costs. And that's what we are, these discussions we are having right now. And it's a question if it's only need to have one organization rolling out the wallet. It's more important whoever wants to roll out a wallet, whatever brand it has, as long as it sits to the specifications, they can talk to each other. So it might be multiple wallet rollout partners to their own customers, but they can talk to each other then. That's the goal. Sharon, something to add?
Yeah, so something that where my mind has gone, this is just a real personal opinion, is that we talk about the digital wallet, but for me, it's the verifiable credential marketplace. It's about putting a verifiable credential and what that value proposition is, being able to use that verifiable credential. So yes, we need a wallet as a medium, et cetera, but it's really the focus, and that's what we're looking at now, is the digital proof points, because that's where the value proposition is, and then the commercial models can come behind that. But that's a really exciting phase that we're moving into now. We've proven that we can do this, that this technology does work. There are different use cases for it, and now we need that ecosystem kind of uptake. And again, it's not from the farmer side; it's from the relying parties and the issuer side.
Maybe to add something here quickly, Trevor, sorry.
Sure, go for it.
An advantage is as well with this consortium is that we on the other side for this demo and this pilot have build a kind of a tech consortium as well, because it was very important for our organizations and members that there's not only one vendor who can help them to roll that out. So Indicio in this case was really a super partner, super helpful, but open and interoperable to work with other vendors. And that technology is more than one vendor. So really showing the interoperability there is helping a lot of uptake and risk mitigation for our organizations and members, because they are resistant to vendor login, because they are used to other legacy systems that they cannot change anything when they signed up for one. And that's helping as well to have the open door and the options at least. And that's a big thank you to the Indicio team.
Thank you. If anybody has a very quick question, we're nearly at time. It will be, I don't see any hands up. I don't see any comments, but a nice one from Kyle. Excellent presentation. The combination of wallet solutions and API solutions is perfect. That's a great note.
Thank you, Kyle. And good to see you as well on the call.
Well, with that, thank you so much.
Could I just say, anybody who'd like to actually run through the presentation, the demo with me and get them on the phone, that is my passion. So if anyone actually wants to run through it and get a farm wallet with some test verifiable credentials on their phone, I'm happy to do that as well.
I actually had the opportunity to do that myself, and it was awesome. For anybody who's working in this field, not working in this field, interested in this field, absolutely take advantage of that offer, because it is a very unique, really awesome demo to walk through. So highly recommend.
Well, thank you so much, Klaeri and Sharon. This is really brilliant work, groundbreaking work, fascinating. Can't wait to hear about the next steps and the next phases. And I'm sure we're going to invite you back on to tell us about those in due course. But with that, I'm going to hand back over to my colleague, Helen, who's going to tell you about the next meetup.
Yes, we are at time. Thank you everyone for joining. Thank you so much, Klaeri and Sharon, for your time. It was a fantastic presentation. We'll have the recording up. We'll send out, I think, a version, slightly edited version of the slides so you can review those. Definitely reach out to Sharon. We'll have her information as well. Next month, we will have another awesome speaker from another industry who's using verifiable credentials, this time for education. We'll talk about Open Badges 3.0. We'll talk about verifiable credentials for employee access, student access, professor access to documentation that's, say inside a university. Lots of cool use cases in the education field. We'll talk to somebody who's working in it. And with that, I'll let it go. But thank you so much for, oh, and there's Klaeri's information there. And she's dropped her email in the chat, so we'll grab that as well. So thank you everyone for joining us, and I will hope to see you next month.